Hey everyone! Before we get to the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Share your thoughts on the story in the comments. Your opinions are very valuable to us. At 2 a.m., my partner radioed me. There's a convoy heading north. They're not responding. I tracked them for 200 miles until dawn, and I still hadn't seen a single driver. My name is Thomas Gray, and I've been serving as an Alaskan State Trooper for over 20 years. I've spent 20 winters on the Dalton Highway, considered the most dangerous road in our country. It's a 414-mile stretch of gravel and ice that connects Fairbanks to Prudhoe Bay, cutting through some of the world's most remote wilderness. They call this road the Haul Road. It was built in the 1970s to support the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. The truckers who drive on it have given it another name, Hell Highway. I've seen things up here that would make most people quit. I've pulled bodies from trucks that went through the ice on the Yukon River. I've found drivers frozen solid in their cabs after their heaters failed. I've watched the aurora borealis dance across the sky while standing next to wreckage that painted the snow red. After 20 years, you think you've seen everything. You'd be wrong. It was a February 14th, 2023. Valentine's Day, though that doesn't mean much when you're 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle, and it's been dark for 3 months straight. Winter on the Dalton means 24-hour darkness, temperatures that drop to 60 below zero, and ice fog so thick you can't see your own hood ornament. I was stationed at Coldfoot, mile 175, the last real outpost of civilization before the Brooks Range. It's not much, a truck stop, a couple of buildings, maybe a dozen people on a good day, but it's got heat, fuel, and a place to sleep, which makes it a palace by Dalton Highway standards. My shift started at midnight. Standard patrol routine. Drive north to Adagun Pass, check on any truckers stopped along the way, make sure nobody's broken down or frozen to death. Then turn around and drive back. 8 hours of staring at darkness and snow. My partner that night was Jake Morrison, a younger trooper, only 5 years on the job. He was working the southern section, Fairbanks to Coldfoot, while I took the northern run. We'd check in every hour on the radio, make sure we were both still breathing. The temperature was 45 below when I left Coldfoot. My patrol vehicle is a modified Ford F-350, built for Arctic conditions. Block heater, studded tires, extra insulation, emergency supplies for a week. You don't take chances up here. If your vehicle dies, you have maybe 30 minutes before hypothermia sets in. An hour, if you're lucky. I drove north into the darkness, my headlights creating a tunnel of light through the ice fog. The road was empty, which wasn't unusual for February. Most of the trucking companies avoid the deep winter months if they can. Too dangerous. Too many accidents. But there are always a few convoys running supplies to the oil fields. The work never really stops. I was about 20 miles north of Coldfoot when Jake's voice crackled through the radio. "Gray, you copy?" I picked up the handset. "Copy. What's up?" "Got a dispatch from the way station at Fairbanks. 7-truck convoy left 3 hours ago, heading to Dead Horse. They're running dark. No GPS transponders, no check-ins. Way station wants us to make contact, verify they're okay." 7 trucks running without transponders wasn't illegal, but it was strange. Most commercial haulers use GPS tracking religiously. Insurance requires it, and the companies want to know where their expensive rigs are at all times. Running dark usually meant independent operators, old-school truckers who didn't trust technology. Did they get the convoy details? Company names? Driver manifests, I asked. Negative. The trucks came through the way station together, but no one got a good look at the company logos. Heavy ice fog at the time. They assumed it was one of the regular Prudhoe Bay suppliers. All right, I'll keep an eye out. They should be coming through my area in the next hour or so. Copy that. Be safe up there. I continued north, climbing into the foothills of the Brooks Range. The elevation gain was gradual but relentless, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. 55 below now. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. Your breath crystallizes instantly. Spilled coffee turns to ice before it hits the ground. The road curved through mountain passes, and I kept my speed around 40 miles per hour. Any faster, and you risk losing control on the ice. Any slower, and you might not have enough momentum to climb the grades. I was approaching mile 195, about 20 miles from Atagun Pass, when I saw them. Lights. 7 sets of lights, spaced evenly, moving north in perfect formation. The convoy. I felt a small surge of relief. At least they were still moving, still making progress. I accelerated slightly to catch up, planning to pace them for a while, maybe get close enough to read company logos or unit numbers. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The spacing between the trucks was too perfect. Exactly 200 feet between each vehicle, like they'd been measured with a surveyor's chain. They were all moving at exactly the same speed. I checked my speedometer as I paced them. 43 miles per hour. Not 42, not 44. And exactly 43. Professional convoy drivers are good at maintaining formation, but this was eerie. No variation at all. No one speeding up slightly on downgrades or slowing on upgrades. Just perfect mechanical consistency. I pulled into the left lane. There's no oncoming traffic to worry about on the Dalton at this hour, and accelerated to pull alongside the last truck in the convoy. It was a Peterbilt 379, an older model but well-maintained. The trailer was a standard 53-footer, unmarked except for some road grime and ice buildup. I looked up at the cab as I passed, trying to see the driver. The cab was dark, no interior lights, no glow from dashboard instruments, just darkness. Maybe the driver had turned everything off to reduce glare, I thought. Some truckers do that in the extreme darkness up here, relying on their headlights and muscle memory. I moved up to the next truck. Another Peterbilt, similar vintage, same dark cab. No visible driver. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. I accelerated more, passing the third truck, then the fourth. All the same. Dark cabs, no visible drivers, perfect formation. I pulled ahead of the convoy and slowed down, letting them catch up. As the lead truck approached, I turned on my spotlight, aiming it at the cab. Empty. No, that wasn't right. I must have missed the driver in the glare. I adjusted the spotlight, moving the beam across the windshield. Still empty. The truck passed me, its engine rumbling steadily, exhaust steam billowing in the Arctic air, and I saw it clearly. The driver's seat was vacant. No person behind the wheel, no hands on the steering wheel. But the truck kept driving. Steady, straight, perfect speed. My heart rate kicked up. I grabbed my radio handset. "Jake, you there?" "Copy, Gray. What's your status?" "I've got the convoy. 7 trucks. Mile 195, heading north. Jake, something's not right. I can't see any drivers." There was a pause. "Say again?" "You can't see drivers?" "The cabs are dark, but I use the spotlight. The driver's seats are empty, all of them." Another pause, longer this time. "Gray, that's not possible. Maybe they're sleeping in the back berths. Some of these big rigs have sleeper cabs." "Not while the trucks are moving, Jake. Not in formation like this. Could be autonomous vehicles. Some companies are testing self-driving trucks." "On the Dalton Highway?" "In February, no way. The technology's not there yet, and even if it was, they'd need special permits. This isn't a test route." "Then what are you saying?" I watched the convoy pull ahead of me. 7 sets of taillights disappearing into the ice fog. I don't know, but I'm following them. Can you contact dispatch? See if anyone knows anything about autonomous truck tests up here. Copy that. Stay safe, Gray, and stay in radio contact. Will do. I accelerated, catching back up to the convoy. This time, I didn't try to pass. I just followed, maintaining a distance of about 500 feet, watching those 7 trucks move through the darkness like a mechanical snake. We continued north. Mile 200. Mile 205. Mile 210. The road here is particularly treacherous, climbing through Alaskan Pass, the highest point on the Dalton at 4,800 feet. The grade is steep, the curves are tight, and in winter the ice can be a foot thick. Most truckers slow to a crawl through this section, using low gears and praying their brakes hold. The convoy didn't slow down. They maintained that same speed, 43 miles per hour, climbing the pass like it was flat ground. I watched in amazement as they navigated curves that should have required careful steering, staying perfectly centered in their lane, never drifting, never correcting. Professional drivers are skilled, but this was beyond skill. This was impossible. At the top of Alaskan Pass, I stopped at the turnout, a small pull-off where truckers sometimes rest before making the descent. I watched the convoy continue over the pass and start down the other side, their lights disappearing into the valley below. I sat there for a moment, engine running, heater blasting, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My training, my experience, my rational mind, all of it was screaming that what I was witnessing couldn't be real. But I was seeing it. 7 trucks, driving themselves in the most hostile environment on the continent. Jake's voice came through the radio. Gray, dispatch says there are no authorized autonomous vehicle tests in Alaska. Nothing on the Dalton, nothing anywhere in the state. They're as confused as we are. Copy that. I'm continuing to follow. Something's very wrong here. Want me to head north? Provide backup? I thought about it. If Jake left his patrol area, the southern section of the highway would be uncovered. But I was dealing with something I didn't understand, and the idea of having backup was appealing. Negative. Stay in your area, but keep the radio clear. I'll check in every 30 minutes. Roger that. Be careful, Gray. I put the vehicle in drive and started down the north side of Alaskan Pass, following those ghost trucks deeper into the Arctic darkness. The descent from Alaskan is steep and winding, dropping 3,000 feet in just a few miles. It's the most dangerous stretch of the entire highway. Trucks have lost their brakes here, careening off the road and tumbling hundreds of feet down the mountainside. In winter, the ice makes it even worse. The convoy navigated it perfectly. No brake lights, no reduction in speed, no cautious crawling. Just that same mechanical 43 miles per hour, taking curves that should have sent them sliding off into the abyss. I followed more carefully, using low gear and gentle braking, feeling my tires slip occasionally on the ice. It took me twice as long to make the descent as it took the convoy. By the time I reached the bottom, they were a mile ahead of me. I accelerated on the flatter ground, trying to catch up. Mile 220, mile 225, mile 230. We were deep in the North Slope now, the vast Arctic coastal plain that stretches from the Brooks Range to the Arctic Ocean. It's flat, featureless, and absolutely desolate. No trees, no buildings, no signs of human life except the road itself. Just endless tundra covered in snow and ice. The convoy continued north with that same perfect consistency. Never varying speed, never deviating from the center of the lane. The trucks didn't even seem to be affected by the crosswinds that occasionally buffeted my vehicle, strong gusts that could push a semi into the ditch. I checked my fuel gauge. half a tank. I'd burned through more than I expected, running at higher speeds to keep up with the convoy. I had enough to make it to Dead Horse, the end of the road, but I'd need to refuel there before heading back. The radio crackled. "Gray, this is Jake. Status update?" "Still following the convoy. Currently at mile 230. No changes. Trucks are still moving in formation. Still no visible drivers. Dispatch wants to know if you've attempted to stop them." I looked at the convoy ahead of me. 7 massive trucks rolling through the darkness. How do you stop something that shouldn't be moving in the first place? "Negative. Not yet. I'm trying to figure out the safest way to approach this. Copy. Keep us informed. Mile 240, mile 250. The sun should have been rising by now, but we were so far north and it was so deep in winter that the best we'd get was a faint gray twilight around noon. For now, it was still pitch black. My headlights and the convoy's taillights the only illumination in a world of darkness. I'd been following them for over 3 hours now. Over 100 miles. And I still had no idea what I was dealing with. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. I'd been watching the last truck in the convoy, keeping my distance, and I suddenly realized I could see through it. Not literally, but in the way light played across its surface. The truck had a solidity to it, a physical presence, but there was something ephemeral about it too. Like it was there, but not quite there. Like I was seeing it through a thin veil. I shook my head, blinking hard. It had to be the ice fog, the darkness, the exhaustion. I'd been awake for 4 hours already, driving in extreme conditions, my eyes strained from staring into the void. But the feeling persisted. These trucks weren't quite real. They were something else. Mile 260. My radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Jake's voice. It was filled with static, a harsh scraping sound that hurt my ears. I turned down the volume, but the static continued, pulsing in rhythm with the convoy's movement. Then, through the static, I heard something else. A voice, distant, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Still driving. Can't stop. Won't let us stop." The voice cut out, replaced by more static. I grabbed the handset. "Hello. Who is this? Identify yourself." More static. Then another voice, different from the first. 29 years. Please, someone help us." 29 years. 2023 minus 29 was 1994. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "This is Alaska State Trooper Thomas Gray. Who am I speaking to? What's your location?" The static intensified, becoming almost unbearable. And then, one more voice, clearer than the others. "We're in the trucks. We've always been in the trucks. And we'll always be in the trucks. Don't follow us. Don't try to stop us. Just let us drive." The radio went dead. Complete silence, not even the usual background static. I tried keying the handset, calling for Jake, calling for dispatch. Nothing. The radio was completely dead. I looked ahead at the convoy, those 7 trucks rolling through the infinite darkness, and I understood with absolute certainty, these weren't trucks. These were ghosts. And I'd been following them for 150 miles into the most remote, most dangerous, most isolated place in North America. I was alone with 7 ghost trucks on the Hall Road, and dawn was still hours away. For a moment after the radio died, I considered turning around. Every instinct I'd developed over 20 years was telling me to get out, to head back to Coldfoot, to call this in and let someone else deal with it. Let the federal authorities handle it. Let the oil companies send their own security. Let anyone but me figure out what these ghost trucks were. But I didn't turn around. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was duty. Or maybe it was something else. the same thing that had kept me on the Dalton Highway for 2 decades when most troopers transferred out after their first winter. The knowledge that up here, there was no one else. If I didn't handle it, no one would. I checked my backup radio, the handheld unit I kept charged in the center console. It powered on, showing a full charge, but when I tried to transmit, I got nothing, not even static. The signal just disappeared into the void like the radio waves themselves were being swallowed by whatever was surrounding those trucks. Mile 270, mile 280, mile 290. We were approaching the section of highway that truckers call the dead zone. It's a 30-mile stretch where even in the best conditions, radio communication is spotty. Something about the topography, the minerals in the ground, the way the aurora borealis interferes with radio waves. Truckers have reported complete communication blackouts here, GPS systems going haywire, compasses spinning uselessly. I'd always assumed it was just the environment. Now, I wasn't so sure. The convoy maintained its perfect formation, that mechanical 43 miles per hour, never varying. I'd been following them for almost 4 hours now, covering nearly 200 miles, and I hadn't seen a single deviation. No lane corrections, no speed changes, not even the slight wandering that happens when a driver gets tired or distracted. Because there were no drivers. Just whatever force was moving these trucks north through the darkness. I thought about what the voices on the radio had said. 29 years. We've always been in the trucks. Won't let us stop. Something had happened in 1994. I'd been working the southern section of the Dalton back then, based out of Fairbanks. I remembered hearing about a convoy that had gone missing that winter, but the details were vague. It was before the era of GPS tracking, before cell phones, before the kind of communication networks we take for granted now. Back then, a truck could simply disappear into the Alaska wilderness and it might be days or weeks before anyone realized it was missing. I tried to recall what I'd heard. 7 trucks, I thought. A convoy heading to Prudhoe Bay with construction supplies for the oil fields. They'd checked in at Coldfoot, said they were pushing through to Deadhorse despite deteriorating weather conditions. And then, nothing. They never arrived. Search parties were sent out, but the winter that year was particularly brutal. Temperatures dropped to 70 below. Blizzards closed the road for weeks at a time. They never found the trucks, never found the drivers. The official report concluded that they'd likely gone off the road in a whiteout, plunged into one of the countless ravines that line the highway, and were buried under snow. The company took the loss. The families held memorial services and life moved on. But what if they'd never stopped driving? What if they'd been trapped, somehow, in a loop? Condemned to drive the Dalton Highway forever, unable to stop, unable to rest, unable to reach their destination? The thought made me grip the steering wheel tighter. My hands were sweating despite the cold. Mile 300. And then, without any warning, the convoy stopped. Not gradually, not with brake lights or any indication of slowing. They just stopped. All 7 trucks simultaneously, as if someone had pressed a pause button on reality. I hit my brakes, sliding slightly on the ice, stopping about 200 feet behind the last truck. My heart was hammering in my chest. The truck sat there, engines still running. I could see the exhaust steam billowing from their stacks, but motionless. I sat in my patrol vehicle watching, waiting for something to happen. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. The trucks didn't move. Finally, I made a decision. I grabbed my flashlight, my backup radio, and my service weapon. I zipped my parka all the way up, pulled my face mask over my nose and mouth, and stepped out into the Arctic night. The cold hit me like a physical blow. 60 below, maybe colder with the wind chill. My breath crystallized instantly, ice forming on my face mask within seconds. The beam of my flashlight seemed weak, swallowed by the darkness. I approached the last truck in the convoy, my boots crunching on the frozen gravel. The truck was a Peterbilt 379, just like I'd noted earlier. The company logo on the door was so weathered and ice-covered that I couldn't read it. I shined my flashlight on the cab looking for any sign of life. The windows were frosted over, but I could see through them enough to confirm what I'd suspected. The driver's seat was empty. No person, no mannequin, no explanation. Just an empty seat. But the engine was running. The gauges on the dashboard were lit, needles pointing to normal operating temperatures and pressures. The steering wheel was centered, the transmission in drive. I moved to the next truck, same thing. Empty cab, running engine, everything functioning as if an invisible driver was behind the wheel. I checked all 7 trucks. Every single one was empty but operational. It defied every law of physics, every understanding of how the world worked, but it was happening right in front of me. I was standing next to the lead truck shining my flashlight into the cab when I heard something that made my blood freeze. A voice coming from inside the truck. "Please, help us." I jerked back, my flashlight beam swinging wildly. The voice was muffled, distant, like it was coming from far away, or from another dimension. "Hello?" I called out, my voice muffled by the face mask. "Who's in there?" "We can't stop. It won't let us stop. Been driving so long." The voice was male, middle-aged, with a trace of a southern accent. It sounded exhausted, desperate, defeated. I grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked, I moved around to the passenger side. Also locked. I considered breaking the window, but something stopped me. Some instinct that told me breaking into these trucks would be a very bad idea. "What happened to you?" I shouted through the window. "What happened in 1994? There was a long pause. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. "Storm." Worst storm I'd ever seen. Couldn't see 5 feet in front of the hood. Should have stopped, should have waited it out, but the company was pushing us. Had to make the deadline. 7 of us, good drivers, experienced. We thought we could handle it. Another pause. I could hear wind howling in the background of his voice, a sound that didn't match the relatively calm night around me. Lost the road somewhere past Adigun. Couldn't tell where the pavement ended and the tundra began. GPS was useless. Radio was dead. We just kept driving. Thought if we kept moving forward, we'd find our way back to the road eventually. "But you didn't," I said quietly. "No, we drove into something. A storm that wasn't a storm. Darkness that wasn't darkness. And when we tried to stop, when we tried to turn around, we couldn't. The trucks wouldn't respond, like something else was controlling them. We've been driving ever since, every winter. When the darkness comes back, we come back. Driving north. Always north. Never stopping. Never arriving." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "How many of you are there?" 7 drivers. We each had a truck. We've been together this whole time. Sometimes we can see each other, in the mirrors, in reflections, but we can't reach each other. Can't leave the cabs. Can't stop driving." "What happens when you reach Dead Horse?" I asked. The voice laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "We never reach Dead Horse. At mile 414, right at the end of the road, we turn around, and we drive back, south, all the way to Fairbanks, and then we turn around and drive north again. Over and over, every winter. 29 years of driving this road." I stood there in the brutal cold, trying to process what I was hearing. These men had been trapped in these trucks for nearly 3 decades, driving an endless loop on the Dalton Highway, unable to stop, unable to rest, unable to escape. "Can you tell me your name?" I asked. "Davis. Marcus Davis. I was hauling construction equipment. Had a wife and 2 kids back in Texas. I was going to retire after this run, buy a boat, do some fishing. Haven't seen them in 29 years. Marcus, I'm going to help you. I'm going to figure out how to stop this. You can't stop it. Others have tried. Other troopers, other drivers who've seen us over the years. No one can stop it. The road won't let us go. The road? This highway. The Dalton. It's not just a road, it's something else, something hungry. It took us that night in 1994, and it's kept us ever since. And it'll take you too if you're not careful. Before I could respond, the truck's engine revved. Not gradually, but suddenly, violently. All 7 trucks roared to life simultaneously, their exhaust stacks belching black smoke into the frozen air. And they started moving. I barely had time to jump back as the lead truck rolled forward. I stumbled, fell on the ice, my flashlight skittering away. By the time I scrambled to my feet, the convoy was already 50 feet ahead of me, accelerating back to that same mechanical 43 miles per hour. I ran back to my patrol vehicle, started it, and took off after them. My hands were shaking, from cold, from adrenaline, from fear. I'd talked to a ghost. A man who'd been dead for 29 years, but was somehow still driving, still conscious, still trapped. The convoy continued north, and I followed. What else could I do? Mile 310. Mile 320. Mile 330. My mind was racing. If what Marcus Davis said was true, then these trucks would drive all the way to Deadhorse, turn around, and drive back to Fairbanks, an endless loop. And if I kept following them, I'd be burning fuel, burning time, getting more and more exhausted. But I couldn't just let them go. These were people, trapped in a nightmare. There had to be a way to help them. I tried the radio again. Still dead. I was completely cut off from civilization, alone on the most dangerous road in North America with 7 ghost trucks and no way to call for help. The smart thing would be to turn back. Get to Coldfoot, use a landline to report what I'd found, bring in resources to deal with this. But something told me that if I left now, I'd never find them again. That they only appeared to certain people at certain times for reasons I didn't understand. Mile 340, mile 350. We were getting close to Deadhorse now. Another 60 miles and we'd be at the end of the road. I checked my fuel gauge. Quarter tank. Enough to get there, but not enough to get back unless I refueled at Deadhorse. The aurora borealis was dancing across the sky now. Great curtains of green and purple light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the convoy's movement. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like the universe itself was watching this impossible parade. I thought about Marcus Davis's words. The road won't let us go. What if he was right? What if there was something about the Dalton Highway itself that had trapped them? The road had been built on traditional Inupiat hunting grounds, carved through wilderness that had been pristine for thousands of years. What if that violation had awakened something, or angered something? It sounded crazy, but I was following 7 ghost trucks through the Arctic darkness. So crazy was apparently on the table. Mile 360, mile 370. The trucks showed no signs of stopping, no signs of slowing. They just kept driving, mechanical and relentless. I glanced at my watch. It was 6:30 a.m. I'd been on duty for 6.5 hours, most of it following this convoy. I should be exhausted, but adrenaline was keeping me sharp, keeping me focused. Ahead, the darkness was starting to lighten slightly. Not true dawn, we wouldn't get that for another month, but the pre-dawn twilight that passes for daylight this far north in winter. The landscape became barely visible, flat, white tundra stretching to the horizon, broken only by the occasional ice-covered stream or drift of snow. and in that growing light I saw something that made me hit the brakes. The convoy was leaving tracks in the snow that paralleled the road, normal tire tracks. But superimposed over those tracks like a double exposure were other tracks, older tracks, weathered tracks that looked like they'd been there for years. The ghost trucks were following their own path from 1994, retracing the exact route they'd taken 29 years ago. Mile 380, mile 390, mile 400. We were in sight of Dead Horse now. I could see the lights of the oil field facilities, the industrial complex that marked the end of the road. The northernmost town in North America, if you could call it a town, more like a work camp, housing for oil workers, maintenance facilities for equipment. Population, around 25 people in winter. The convoy continued toward Dead Horse, and I followed, wondering what would happen when they reached mile 414. Would they simply turn around and head south, starting their endless loop over again? Would they disappear? Would something worse happen? I was about to find out. Mile 410, mile 412, mile 414. The official end of the Dalton Highway. Beyond this point, the road becomes private, restricted to oil company vehicles only. A simple sign marks the terminus, End State Maintenance. The convoy slowed as it approached the turnaround area, a wide gravel lot where trucks can reverse direction for the long drive back south. My heart was pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. Would they turn around, or would something else happen? The lead truck reached the turnaround point and stopped. Then the second truck, then the third. All 7 trucks came to a complete halt, engines idling, exhaust steam rising into the gray dawn light. I stopped about 100 feet behind them, watching, waiting. For a full minute, nothing happened. The trucks just sat there, motionless. I could see them more clearly now in the growing light. They looked old, weathered, covered in decades of road grime and rust. But they also looked solid, real, not ghostly at all in the weak daylight. Then, slowly, impossibly, the trucks began to turn. Not by steering, not by backing up and repositioning. They simply rotated. The lead truck spun 180 degrees on its axis, the trailer swinging around with it, defying every law of physics. Then the second truck rotated, then the third. I watched in stunned silence as all 7 trucks performed this impossible maneuver, turning around without moving forward or backward, without leaving their positions in line. And then they started driving south. Same formation, same spacing, same speed. Back the way we'd come. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I'd just seen. Then I made a decision. I wasn't following them back. Not yet. I needed answers, and I might find them in Dead Horse. I drove the last half mile to the Dead Horse facilities as the convoy disappeared behind me, heading south into the fading twilight. The temperature had dropped even further, 65 below now, according to my dashboard thermometer. Dangerously cold, even by Arctic standards. Dead Horse was a collection of modular buildings, storage tanks, and heavy equipment. Everything painted industrial white or gray, designed for function over form. I pulled into the main compound and parked near what looked like the operations center. Inside, I found a handful of oil workers gathered around a space heater, drinking coffee. They looked surprised to see me. State troopers don't usually come all the way to Dead Horse unless there's been an accident. "Morning," I said, pulling down my face mask. "I'm Trooper Gray. I need to use your landline." An older man, probably the site supervisor, nodded. "Sure thing, in the office." "Everything okay?" "Not sure yet. I need to make some calls." I used their phone to call the State Trooper dispatch in Fairbanks. It took a while to get through. The satellite connection was spotty, but eventually I reached the dispatcher. "This is Trooper Gray. Unit 34. I'm at Dead Horse. I need you to pull any records you have on a convoy that went missing in 1994. 7 trucks, winter transport, headed for Prudhoe Bay. 1994? That's going back a ways. What's this about? Just pull the records. I'll explain when I get back. Copy that. Might take a few hours to dig through the archives. That's fine. I'll check back in later. I hung up and turned to the supervisor. You been working up here long? 15 years. Why? You ever hear stories about ghost trucks? Convoys that drive themselves? He gave me a look that said he thought I might be suffering from cold-induced dementia. Ghost trucks? Can't say I have. What about the 1994 convoy, the one that disappeared? His expression changed. Oh, that. Yeah, I heard about that. Before my time, but the old-timers talk about it. 7 trucks, good drivers, vanished in a storm. They never found them. Figured they went through the ice somewhere or got buried in a ravine. Anyone ever report seeing trucks that don't have drivers? Trucks that move on their own? He was quiet for a moment, studying me. You've seen something. Answer the question. He sighed. Look, there are stories. Truckers talk. Every few years someone reports seeing a convoy running dark. No radio contact, no drivers visible. Most people write it off as exhaustion, ice fog playing tricks. But yeah, there are stories. When was the last report? Maybe 3, 4 years ago? A trucker swore he saw 7 rigs running in perfect formation, wouldn't respond to radio calls. He tried to follow them but lost them somewhere around Adigun Pass. Thought he was losing his mind. He wasn't losing his mind. You saw them? The ghost convoy? I didn't just see them. I followed them for 200 miles, and I talked to one of the drivers. The supervisor's eyes widened. That's not possible. Tell that to Marcus Davis and his crew. They're still out there driving that road trapped in some kind of loop. 29 years of driving back and forth between Fairbanks and Dead Horse, unable to stop, unable to rest. The other workers had stopped talking now, listening to our conversation. One of them, a younger guy, spoke up. My uncle drove the Dalton back in the 90s. He told me about the missing convoy, said they were good guys, professional haulers. The company never recovered from the loss. 7 trucks, 7 trailers full of expensive equipment, 7 drivers who had families. Just gone. They're not gone, I said. They're still here, still driving. I spent the next hour at Dead Horse, warming up, drinking coffee, and trying to figure out my next move. The dispatcher called back with some information from the 1994 files. Gray, I found the report. A 7-truck convoy owned by Northern Freight Lines departed Fairbanks on February 12, 1994. Drivers were Marcus Davis, Robert Chen, James Wheeler, Thomas Kowalski, Samuel Reed, David Martinez, and Frank O'Brien, all experienced drivers. They checked in at Coldfoot, reported deteriorating weather conditions, but said they were going to push through. Last radio contact was at approximately 11 p.m., somewhere around mile 200. Search and rescue teams searched for 2 weeks but found nothing. The official conclusion was death by exposure, bodies and vehicles presumed buried under snow and ice. What happened to the families? The company paid out life insurance, held memorial services. Most of the families moved away. It was a big deal at the time, 7 men dead, biggest trucking disaster in Alaska history. Then it just faded from the news. And no one's reported seeing the trucks since. There are a few reports in the system over the years. Like I said, most were written off as driver fatigue or hallucinations. One report from 2007, one from 2012, one from 2019, but nothing concrete. No one took them seriously. Well, They need to start taking them seriously. Those trucks are still out there, and those drivers are still trapped inside them. Gray, are you feeling okay? Maybe you should come back to Fairbanks, get checked out. Hypothermia can cause hallucinations, confusion. I'm not hallucinating. I'm not confused. I saw them. I followed them. I talked to Marcus Davis. He told me about the storm, about losing the road, about driving into something that trapped them. This is real. There was a long pause. Okay, say I believe you. What do you want to do about it? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. I hung up and turned to the supervisor. I need to refuel, then I'm going back out there. To do what? To find a way to stop this. To free those drivers. He shook his head. You can't fight the road, Trooper. The Dalton takes what it wants, always has. What's that supposed to mean? He glanced at the other workers, then back at me. This highway wasn't supposed to be here. The Inupiat people, the ones who've lived in this region for thousands of years, they warned against building it, said this land was sacred, that there were spirits here that shouldn't be disturbed. The oil companies didn't listen. They built the pipeline, they built the road, they tore up the tundra, and strange things have been happening ever since. What kind of strange things? Accidents that don't make sense. Equipment that fails for no reason. Workers who disappear and turn up miles away with no memory of how they got there. And, yeah, vehicles that drive themselves. The road is hungry, Trooper. It takes things, and it doesn't give them back. I wanted to dismiss this as superstition, as the kind of folklore that grows up around dangerous places. But I'd seen the ghost convoy. I'd talked to a man who'd been dead for 29 years. I couldn't dismiss anything anymore. Is there anyone local I can talk to? I asked. Someone from the Inupiat community who might know more about this. The supervisor thought for a moment. There's an elder in Nuiqsut, about 50 miles west of here. Name's John Tutkavin. He's one of the last people who remembers the old stories, before the pipeline changed everything. If anyone knows about the spirits of this place, it's him. Can I get there by road? There's a winter trail. It's rough, and you'll need good visibility, but yeah, it's doable. I checked the time. It was almost 9 a.m. The ghost convoy would be heading south now, retracing their route back toward Fairbanks. If I was going to catch them again, if I was going to find a way to break this loop, I needed information. Give me directions to Nuiqsut. An hour later, I was driving west across the north slope, following a barely visible trail across the frozen tundra. The landscape here was even more desolate than the Dalton Highway. No trees, no landmarks, just endless white punctuated by the occasional drift of snow or frozen stream. The village of Nuiqsut was tiny, maybe 400 people, most of them living in simple houses clustered around a community center. I found John Tutkavin sitting outside his home, despite the brutal cold, watching the horizon. He was ancient, his face deeply lined, his eyes surprisingly sharp. When I approached, he nodded as if he'd been expecting me. "You're the trooper who followed the ghost trucks," he said without preamble. I stopped, startled. "How did you—" "The land speaks, the spirits speak. You followed the lost ones, the ones who can't stop driving. They've been trapped since the big storm, 1994, many winters ago. Can you help me? Is there a way to free them?" He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the tundra. Finally, he spoke. "The road is a wound. A scar across sacred land. When they built it, they awakened something old, something that feeds on motion, on movement, on the need to go forward. The drivers, they pushed too hard, drove too far in the storm. They crossed a threshold, passed through a place where the veil is thin, and now they're stuck between worlds, neither fully here nor fully gone. How do I stop it? You can't stop the road. But you can close the wound. Where they were lost, where they crossed over, that's where the tear is. You have to go there, find the exact spot, and perform a closing. Give them permission to stop. Release them from their obligation to move forward. A closing? What does that mean? It means you stand at the threshold and tell them they can rest, that their journey is over, that they don't have to drive anymore. The road feeds on obligation, on duty, on the need to complete the task. Break that, and you break the hold. Where is this threshold? Where did they cross over? The place where the storm was strongest, where the road disappears in darkness. You'll know it when you see it. The land remembers. I thanked him and drove back to the Dalton Highway. It was almost noon now, and the convoy would be somewhere south of Adigan Pass, continuing their endless drive back toward Fairbanks. I headed south, driving fast, trying to calculate where they might be. If they maintained that same 43 miles per hour, never stopping, they'd be around mile 250 by now. I drove for hours, watching for any sign of the convoy. The day, such as it was this far north in winter, began to fade back into twilight. By 3 p.m., it was fully dark again, and I was back in the world of headlights and shadows. Mile 260, mile 250, mile 240. And then I saw them. 7 sets of taillights, moving south in perfect formation. I accelerated, catching up to the convoy. They didn't acknowledge my presence, just kept driving with that same mechanical precision. I thought about what John Kevin had said, find the threshold, the place where they crossed over, where the road disappears in darkness. As if in answer, I felt something change in the air. The temperature dropped even further, 70 below now, maybe colder. Ice fog rolled in from nowhere, thick and disorienting. My headlights barely penetrated it. We were approaching mile 200, the area where Marcus Davis had said they'd lost the road during the storm. This was it, the threshold. I accelerated, pulling alongside the convoy. Through the ice fog, I could barely see the trucks, but they were there, solid and spectral at the same time. I grabbed my radio handset, knowing it was dead, but trying anyway. Marcus Davis, if you can hear me, I need you to stop. I need you to listen to me. Static. Then, faintly, we can't stop. We tried to stop. It won't let us. I'm giving you permission to stop. Your journey is over. You don't have to drive anymore. You can rest. Can't stop. Have to keep moving. Have to finish the route. The route is finished. You've driven it for 29 years. That's enough. It's time to rest. The convoy wavered, like a mirage in the ice fog. For a moment, I could see through the trucks, see the ghostly outline of drivers at the wheels, their faces worn and exhausted. Your families know you did your best. They know you were good drivers, good men. They don't expect you to keep driving forever. It's okay to stop. The truck slowed, not much, but noticeably. 40 miles per hour, 35, 30. You can stop now. You have permission to stop. Your duty is fulfilled. 25 miles per hour, 20, 15, and then, finally, they stopped. All 7 trucks standing still on the Dalton Highway, engines idling, but motionless. I stopped my vehicle and stepped out into the brutal cold. I approached the lead truck, the one I knew belonged to Marcus Davis. Through the frosted windshield I could see him now. Not clearly, but there. A shape, a presence. A man who'd been trapped for 3 decades. "Thank you," his voice came through the radio, clearer than it had ever been. "Thank you for telling us we could stop." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, we rest." The engines of all 7 trucks shut off simultaneously. The headlights faded. The solid presence of the trucks began to waver, becoming translucent, then transparent. I watched as the ghost convoy faded away, dissolving into the ice fog like they'd never been there at all. The last thing I heard was Marcus Davis's voice, "We're finally home." And then they were gone. The road was empty. Just me, standing in 70 below darkness, alone on the Dalton Highway. I stood there for a long time, making sure they weren't coming back. But I knew somehow that they wouldn't. The loop was broken. The wound was closed. The lost drivers of 1994 were finally at rest. I drove back to Coldfoot in silence, my radio still dead, my thoughts heavy. When I arrived, Jake was waiting for me, frantic with worry. "Gray! Jesus Christ, where have you been? You've been off radio for 12 hours. "Following ghosts," I said quietly, "and setting them free." They didn't believe me at first. The official report I filed the next day read like something from a paranormal investigation show, not a state trooper incident report. 7 ghost trucks. A convoy trapped in a time loop for 29 years. Voices on the radio from dead drivers. An Inupiat elder who explained how to close a spiritual wound. My supervisor, Captain Elizabeth Morrison, read the report twice, then looked at me with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Gray, I've known you for 15 years. You're the most level-headed trooper I've got. But this," she tapped the report, "this is asking me to believe in ghosts. I know how it sounds. Do you? Because it sounds like you spent 12 hours in 70 below temperatures, possibly experienced hypothermia-induced hallucinations, and now you're claiming you freed the souls of 7 dead truckers by giving them permission to stop driving. That's exactly what happened." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "The Fairbanks dispatcher says you called in asking about the 1994 convoy. The Dead Horse supervisor says you were asking about ghost trucks. And you drove 50 miles off route to Nuiqsut to talk to a village elder about spirits. I followed proper procedure. I investigated a suspicious convoy, attempted to make contact, and when that failed, I sought information from local sources. You followed empty trucks for 200 miles. They weren't empty. They were being driven by the trapped consciousness of 7 men who died in 1994. Morrison rubbed her temples. "Gray, I need you to take a week off, mandatory. See the department psychologist, get a full medical evaluation. The Dalton Highway in winter is brutal, and even experienced troopers can develop issues. I don't have issues. I have a report to file and 7 families who deserve to know that their loved ones are finally at peace. You want me to call the families of men who died 29 years ago and tell them what exactly? That a state trooper saw their ghost trucks and performed an exorcism? It wasn't an exorcism. It was a release. And yes, they deserve to know." Morrison sighed deeply. "I'm not putting this in the official record. I'll file it as a false alarm. Reported convoy turned out to be ice fog and light distortion. You attempted to investigate but found nothing. End of story. That's not what happened. That's what the official record will say. For your sake, Gray, you file this report as written, and your career is over. People will think you've lost your mind. Is that what you want?" I sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the choice. Tell the truth and be branded as crazy, or accept the cover story and let the real story die. "What about the next time?" I finally asked. "What about the next trooper who sees them? The next trucker who encounters a convoy that shouldn't exist? If those trucks are really gone like you say, there won't be a next time." She was right, of course. If I'd truly freed the drivers, if the loop was broken, then no one would ever see the ghost convoy again. The phenomenon was over. But that didn't mean I had to be silent about it. "I'll take the week off," I said. "I'll see the psychologist. But I'm not changing my report. File it however you want officially, but I know what I saw. I know what I did. And those 7 men are finally free because I didn't dismiss it as hallucination or ignore it as impossible." Morrison looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Take your week. We'll talk when you get back." I didn't spend my week off relaxing. Instead, I spent it researching, digging through archives, tracking down families, trying to piece together the full story of the 1994 convoy. The official accident report was sparse. 7 trucks, 7 drivers, departed Fairbanks February 12, 1994, during a break in bad weather. The forecast called for clear conditions, but a surprise storm system moved in faster than predicted. The convoy checked in at Coldfoot around 8 p.m., reported deteriorating conditions but said they were going to push through. They were hauling critical equipment for the Prudhoe Bay oil fields, pumps, generators, replacement parts that were urgently needed. The last radio contact was at 11:07 p.m., somewhere around mile 200. The convoy leader, Marcus Davis, reported 0 visibility and said they were slowing down but continuing north. After that, silence. Search and rescue operations began the next day, but were hampered by the continuing storm. Winds reached 80 miles per hour, temperature dropped to 68 below, and visibility was measured in feet, not miles. The search continued for 2 weeks, but they found nothing. No trucks, no wreckage, no bodies. It was as if the convoy had simply vanished. The official conclusion was that they'd lost the road in the whiteout, driven off into the tundra, and either gone through the ice of a frozen river or been buried in a ravine by blowing snow. 7 death certificates were issued. 7 memorial services were held. I found contact information for 5 of the 7 families. 2 had moved overseas and I couldn't locate them. But the other 5, I called them. The conversation with Marcus Davis's widow was the hardest. Margaret Davis was 67 now, living in a retirement community in Arizona. When I called and identified myself as an Alaskan State Trooper, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Has there been news?" "After all this time." "Mrs. Davis, I need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible, but I need you to hear me out." I told her everything. The convoy I'd followed, the voices on the radio, the conversation with her husband, the way I'd released them from their endless drive. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard her crying. "He's finally at peace." "Yes, ma'am." "He is. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. Everyone said he was gone, that we needed to accept it and move on. But I always felt like he was still out there, still trying to get home. Now I know why. He was still driving, still trying to finish his route. He told me about you, about the boat he wanted to buy, about retiring." She laughed through her tears. "He loved that old truck more than he loved me, I think. Said driving was in his blood. Said he'd die behind the wheel someday. I guess, in a way, he did. He asked me to tell you that he's sorry he never made it home." "Tell him," she stopped, caught herself. "I mean, if you could have told him. Tell him I forgive him. Tell him I understand. And tell him I never stopped loving him. I think he knew that, Mrs. Davis." I had similar conversations with the other 4 families. Some believed me immediately. Others were skeptical but grateful that someone cared enough to call 29 years later. All of them shared the same feeling, that their loved ones had never truly been at rest, that something had been left unfinished, and now it was finished. 3 weeks after the incident, I returned to duty on the Dalton Highway. Captain Morrison had filed the official report as she'd promised. False alarm, weather phenomenon, no action required. My conversation with the department psychologist had gone better than expected. He diagnosed me with acute stress reaction, but cleared me for duty with the recommendation that I take regular mental health breaks. I didn't tell him that I had no intention of leaving the Dalton Highway. This was where I belonged. This was where I was needed. My first patrol back was a night shift, naturally. Jake Morrison was my partner again, working the southern section while I took the northern run. As I drove north from Coldfoot, I found myself unconsciously checking for convoy lights ahead of me, listening for voices on the radio. But the radio was silent except for occasional check-ins with dispatch. The road ahead was empty except for a few commercial haulers running their regular routes. Everything was normal, almost normal. At mile 200, where I'd released the ghost convoy, I stopped and got out of my vehicle. The temperature was a relatively balmy 40 below, and the sky was clear. The aurora borealis was dancing overhead, green and purple curtains of light that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. I stood there for a few minutes just listening to the silence, and I could have sworn I heard something, not words but a feeling, a sense of gratitude, of peace, of rest, finally achieved. "You're welcome," I said to the empty air. "Drive safe wherever you are." I got back in my vehicle and continued north, and I never saw the ghost convoy again. But the story didn't end there. It never really does with these things. Other stories started to surface. Truckers who'd been driving the Dalton for decades began talking about encounters they'd dismissed or hidden. A driver who'd seen a convoy of old rigs running dark in 2007 and had been too afraid to report it. A mechanic who'd found a Peterbilt 379 parked at Coldfoot one morning in 2012. Engine running, cab empty, and when he went to get help, it had vanished. The stories had always been there. I just hadn't known to look for them. I started keeping a log, unofficial and private. Any report of unusual convoy sightings, any mention of vehicles that didn't quite add up, any strange radio transmissions. The file grew slowly but steadily. Most of them were explainable. Weather phenomena, exhaustion, misidentification. But a few, a very few, had that same quality as the ghost convoy. That sense of something caught between worlds, unable to rest. I investigated when I could, quietly, off the record. I couldn't free them all. Some phenomena were beyond my ability to understand or intervene. But a few times I was able to help. There was a single semi, a Kenworth from the 1980s, that had been spotted occasionally near Atigun Pass. I found the driver's name in old accident reports. Robert Chen, one of the 7 from the 1994 convoy. Apparently, he'd split off from the others before I'd released them, caught in his own separate loop. I found him on a winter night, driving north with that same mechanical precision. I followed the same process, found the threshold, spoke the words of release, gave him permission to stop, and he faded away, just like the others. There was a pickup truck, vintage 1970s, that appeared every few years near Coldfoot. I traced it back to a pipeline worker who'd frozen to death in his truck in 1977 during a mechanical breakdown. The relief on his ghostly face when I told him it was okay to stop, that help had finally arrived, was something I'll never forget. The Dalton Highway has taken many lives over the decades, and some of those lives, it seems, have a hard time letting go. I'm still on the Dalton Highway, still patrolling the same sections, still watching for both the living and the dead. I've learned to recognize the signs of something caught between worlds, the perfect mechanical precision, the lack of visible drivers, the strange behavior of electronic equipment, the voices in radio static. My reputation in the department is mixed. Some people think I'm eccentric but effective. Others think I'm crazy but harmless. My supervisor still files my more unusual reports as weather phenomena or equipment malfunctions. But the families know. The ones I've been able to contact, the ones whose loved ones were trapped in vehicles for years or decades, they know, and they're grateful. Jake asked me once why I keep doing this, why I stay on the Dalton when I could transfer to easier, safer, more populated areas, why I chase ghosts instead of just doing standard police work. Because someone has to, I told him. This road is dangerous enough for the living. The dead deserve someone looking out for them, too. He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Just don't expect me to follow any ghost convoys with you. Deal. It's been 3 years since I freed the 1994 convoy. I'm 55 now, eligible for retirement if I want it, but I'm not ready to leave yet. The Dalton still needs me. The dead still need me. Last winter, I got a call from a trucker who'd been driving the Dalton for 40 years. He wanted to meet me at Coldfoot, said he had something to show me. I met him at the truck stop, and he pulled out a photograph. It was old, faded, taken with a 1990s-era camera. It showed 7 trucks stopped at the Coldfoot fueling area, their drivers standing in front of them, smiling. That's the 1994 convoy, he said, taken the day before they disappeared. I was there that day, fueling up, heading south while they were heading north. Nice guys, professional drivers. They were in good spirits, joking about finishing this run and taking some time off. He pointed to one of the men in the photo. That's Marcus Davis. He bought me coffee, gave me some tips about driving in severe cold. Good man. I always wondered what happened to them. They're at rest now, I said quietly. All of them. He looked at me sharply. You're the trooper, the one who saw them. Yes. Did you really free them? The other drivers, we hear stories. Some people say you're crazy. But some people say you actually did it. That you found the ghost convoy and released them. I did what needed to be done. He was quiet for a moment, then held out the photograph. Take it. I think Marcus would want you to have it. Proof that they were real people, not just ghosts. Men with families, with dreams, with lives. I took the photograph and studied it. 7 men, young and healthy, standing in front of their trucks with that particular pride that good drivers have. They had no idea that in 24 hours, they'd be trapped in a nightmare that would last 3 decades. Thank you, I said. I'll keep this. One more thing, the trucker said. There's an old winter maintenance building at mile 200. It's been abandoned for years, but I checked it out last month. Someone's been leaving things there. Gifts, I think, for the drivers. What kind of gifts? Coffee thermoses, road maps, pictures of families, things a trucker might want to have with them. The families, I think they know about mile 200. They're leaving offerings. I drove out to mile 200 the next day. The maintenance building was half collapsed, but inside I found what the trucker had described. A small shrine, essentially. 7 coffee thermoses arranged in a row. 7 road maps, 7 photo frames, each containing a picture of a family. And a note, handwritten on weathered paper. Thank you for bringing them home. The families. I stood there for a long time, looking at those offerings. The families had found their own way to honor their loved ones, to mark the place where they'd been lost and found again. I added something to the shrine. The photograph the trucker had given me, placed carefully in the center. 7 men in front of their trucks, smiling, alive, ready for one more run. Rest well, I said to the empty building. Your journey is over. I'm telling you this story for a reason. If you're reading this, If you're hearing these words, you need to understand something about the Dalton Highway and places like it. Remote roads, isolated highways, places where the wilderness presses close and civilization feels far away. These roads remember. They hold on to things. And sometimes, the people who travel them get caught, trapped in loops of motion and obligation, unable to rest even in death. If you ever find yourself driving a remote highway and you see something that doesn't quite make sense, vehicles moving in ways they shouldn't, drivers who aren't quite there, patterns that seem too perfect to be natural, don't dismiss it. Don't assume you're hallucinating or mistaken. You might be seeing something caught between worlds, something that needs help. And if you are, remember what I did. Find the threshold. Speak the words of release. Give them permission to stop. Tell them their duty is fulfilled, their journey is complete, that they can finally rest. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes the dead are just waiting for someone to tell them it's okay to stop moving. The Dalton Highway still runs from Fairbanks to Deadhorse, 414 miles of gravel and ice and wilderness. Truckers still drive it year-round, hauling supplies to the oil fields. Accidents still happen. People still die. But the ghost convoy of 1994 doesn't drive it anymore. 7 men finally found peace after 29 years of endless motion. And if you ever drive the Dalton Highway in winter, if you stop at mile 200 and listen carefully, you might hear something in the silence. Not words, but a feeling. A sense of gratitude from 7 drivers who are finally home. I'm retiring next month. 23 years on the Dalton Highway, countless patrols, more rescues than I can count, and a handful of encounters with things that shouldn't exist but do. Last night, on what might be my final night patrol, something happened that I need to record. I was at mile 200, the place where I'd released the ghost convoy 3 years ago. It was 2 a.m., 50 below, and I'd stopped to check the shrine the families had built. Someone had recently left fresh flowers, somehow preserved despite the cold. As I stood there, my radio crackled to life. Not Jake, not dispatch. A different voice. Familiar. Trooper Gray, this is Marcus Davis. Do you copy? My heart stopped. I grabbed the handset. Marcus? How is this possible? Just wanted to say thank you one more time. We're all here, all 7 of us. We've been watching over you best we can. You gave us peace. We wanted to return the favor. Where are you? Somewhere better. Somewhere the road finally ends. But we wanted you to know. What you did mattered. You freed us. You gave us back to our families, and we'll never forget that. I was just doing my job. No, you did more than that. You saw us when everyone else looked away. You believed when everyone else dismissed us. You cared about 7 dead truckers when it would have been easier to just keep driving. There was a pause then. The Dalton will miss you when you retire. But you've earned your rest, Trooper. You've earned your peace. Thank you for giving us ours. Drive safe, Marcus, wherever you are. Always do, Trooper. Always do. The radio went silent. I tried calling back, but there was no response. Just the usual static of the Dalton Highway night. I got back in my patrol vehicle and continued north, one last run up the Hall Road. The aurora borealis was particularly bright that night, dancing across the sky in shades of green and purple and blue. And for just a moment, in the patterns of light, I could have sworn I saw them. 7 trucks, running in perfect formation, their lights bright against the darkness. But when I looked again, there was only the aurora, swirling and beautiful and eternal. I smiled and drove on, into the Arctic night, on a road that remembers everything and everyone who's ever traveled it. The Dalton Highway, the Hall Road, Hell's Highway, the most dangerous, most beautiful, most haunted road in North America. And for 23 years it was mine to protect, both the living and the dead.